Good morning, hello. So the social media algorithm hasn't been showing me very much art journaling content lately. I don't know if it's because I simply haven't engaged with it enough, or if the overall popularity of art journaling has actually waned, but I think it deserves a bit of a comeback. And a big facet of art journaling is the inclusivity, to use different materials and scribble your heart out without worrying about making something that looks good or appeals to another person. And we're always kind of starting with the same techniques, which is gluing down random papers that are inevitably going to be covered up. But I'm wearing this old hat today because the shiny magazine pages in this book are just no fun to paint on. So doing this gives me a surface that paint will actually stick to. Starting with this repetitive activity is an easy way for me to get into that flow state that allows me to sit for longer than 5 minutes. I'm going to use my Himi gouache, which has certainly seen better days, but it's neither dried up nor moldy, so that's pretty good. This turned out to be a terrible choice later, as you'll see. So while I make this, I'm listening to a song called Ice Shelf. It's very cinematic, and it kind of makes me feel like I'm being hunted in Arctic tundra. It's a cool song. And this was chosen specifically because for once, I do actually have a specific idea for the spread. I imagined a wintry forest layered with fog, and in the foreground will be a tiny exposed deer waiting patiently to be found again. One thing I'd really like to focus on improving this year is foliage. I've also just started kind of trying to teach myself a little art history. Art history is and will be really daunting, but that is something that I've been doing on Patreon in January. So if you want to explore little tidbits of art history with me, we can all gather over there. The proper time to have actually done this art journal page should have been 2 weeks ago, when I got news that an estranged family member had passed away. And I know that a lot of you guys hate sadness, but I also don't want to sound like a robot. So just for context, it was an estranged parent who I haven't actually seen or spoken to since I was 15. And this was just a couple of weeks ago, so unfortunately I'd kept myself too busy unpacking all the craft fairs, being social. And I have intense feelings, of course. It's just really complicated. I felt like it didn't really make sense to mourn a person who I didn't know anymore. And that I was really just mourning this old dream that maybe one day I'd feel a little less rejected and that my whole life could improve. And in fact, this specific art journal was where I was putting all of those feelings for the past few years. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with it now. I don't really need to decide right now. So my experience with doing this art journal page 2 weeks after I wanted to do it, I'm reminded of a really good piece of advice I heard recently, which is to never delay an idea. And if you feel like painting or journaling, to do it as soon as possible. At least draw the line art for the painting you're excited about, or start a project you don't know how to do. Because, and this is something that I completely relate to, with too much distance, too much planning, it suddenly turns into a task on a to-do list, something that you just ought to do instead of something that you're excited to do. And 2 weeks was too long to delay making this art journal spread, because I was originally looking forward to being sad and weepy over my tiny deer waiting to be found. But I kind of just didn't want to anymore. And yeah, it looks kind of like I made a huge mud puddle mess over my cute papers. It gets a little better, I promise. That's my experience of art journaling every time. It always looks really ugly. art journaling was a big way that I got myself back into making art when I wasn't doing that for like a couple of years. Because for me, I felt like the hardest part about making art was expressing yourself visually. And art journaling was letting your emotions or feelings or experiences kind of guide you. People were like looking at my art journals, and I didn't want them to read my thoughts, and I didn't want to read my own stuff after. So coming up with little images that sort of represent different things, I think it was a huge step in my art practice, actually. But at first, having all of this freedom to just do whatever can also be kind of tricky though, because I know that when I spend a few hours just slathering paint around and then I ended up with a mud puddle mess, it usually felt like I've wasted my time. And so I totally get it. The gouache was a terrible choice. Adding the fog layer just obliterated the trees. But because it's just art journaling, I did end up switching to a white pencil crayon, so I could at least make it a little fluffier. I think this really turned around once I added a slight impression of old snow in the foreground with the white paint. I drew stones around this drawing of a father and child because it felt weirdly cosmic. I picked that up randomly. So just this one kind of layer of paint in the front and the little flecks of grass made this whole spread really come together all of a sudden, even before I added the little baby deer. like how this page turned out. I think it has some of the best composition in this art journal. And so like developing a visual language, letting my emotions and experiences kind of guide my decisions on what images to use. The tiny baby deer left behind in the forest, trusting, mama deer to come back and get it. Starting with a collage layer just to get into a flow state and add a little texture to the background. Taking some fun chances, and I ended up with something that maybe I can turn into a real painting sometime. Thanks for watching. Bye bye!